Hey guys, welcome to Quinian's Budget Crafts. Sorry about the long delay, a fur beast from the deep attacked the ship, but extra long wait, extra long video. So time to do some details to break up all this brown. We've got all the cannons and such from a couple weeks back, and we'll use more of these barrels that I like. You can get them from Amazon. Also going to want a whole bunch of skulls. This box of Citadel skulls should do the trick. And a bunch of random bones. These are legs from a skeleton spider that I got at the dollar store and then chopped up. As for these skulls, you get a lot. Here's what's in the box. For this, we're going to want the human skulls. And there are two variations of human skulls. Some that are messed up and some that are in good order, and both have a complete and a jawless version. So we'll use all four? Now I can't hold on to these tiny things even with tweezers, so I'll just paint them on the sprue. Hose them down with some spray-on gray primer, even though they're already gray, and then paint them with antique white. On a couple of the rows that don't have battle damage, do some in a nice gold. Now I don't want these barrels to be the same boring brown of a normal barrel. They're supposed to be powder kegs. As a bit of a nod to video games, let's do them up in barn red. 16 of the little ones, and we'll do 4 of the big ones to put in the hold. Just mix the barn red with a little bit of water and dump all the little barrels in there. It's a whole lot easier and faster to paint them this way. Fish them out and wipe off the excess paint and then set them aside to dry. Just make sure you set them bottom down in case they leave some paint behind whatever you set them on when you pick them up. Once that's done, do the big ones. These are powder kegs, so unlike other barrels, they won't have steel bands on them. You could do the bands in a brown or something, but with the black wash I'm going to use to kill this red, you probably wouldn't even see that. So we'll do a few more barrels in a nice dark brown to put in the hold as rum barrels. Do skeletons drink? Once those are all nice and dry, just dunk them in your black wash and set them aside. We want these to be a very, very dark, dirty looking, so anywhere that the wash settles and makes a super dark spot, that'll be perfect. When you paint these skulls, make sure to get the sides and the bottom, but also try not to clog up the details. Gold ones, I guess you could 100% gold, but on the white ones, you don't want to get white in the eye sockets if you can avoid it. Just get some paint on the brush and sort of evenly distribute it. Then go through and spread it all over to make sure that they're all covered. Grab your box of bits and bobs and see what you might want to use. Some scrolls, some pages, some books, maybe a couple little bottles. And just set that stuff aside for now. If you want to see how the books and bottles are made, go check out the DMG. He has some great tutorials on those. Now, using a silver Sharpie, go ahead and color the bands on the dark brown barrels, just like we did on the tavern. And then very, very carefully put a few X's or write down rum or whatever. Okay, now put on some headphones, crank it up, and lock the door. Time to cut holes in this thing. Figure out how tall you want the gun ports to be. I went with 1 1/4 inches, mostly because that's what lines up with the paneling on the outside of the ship. Lay the ruler on the inside wall where the cannon is going to be, and then use it to cut out both sides of the gun port. Most rulers like this are 1 inch wide, so that's going to be perfect here. What I found worked best was to mark both sides of the ruler, stab in at the dots, and then cut from the floor back to the dots. Very carefully cut it out along the bottom and pop it out. Save these pieces, you're going to use those for the door on the outside. Following your hole, go ahead and stab through so you can mark the other side where you need to cut it, and then flip it over and cut it from the outside. This cut doesn't really need to be quite as exact because we're going to frame this later, but do try to keep it neat if you can. As for the gap left between the walls, you can try to plug it if you want to, but I didn't. With some paint in there, you really don't see it. With all your doors cut out, figure out where the deck gun should go. I was going to put one in the corner here and then cut the corner away. I ended up not putting it there, so feel free to not chop up your ship here. If you do cut this out, just use some sandpaper to smooth it over. We also need some stairs going into the hold, but we don't have much depth to work with, so let's fake it. Use some of those coffee stir sticks, and then stack them up like you did the siding on the cabins, and glue them in. If you already have a piece made, just trim it to fit. When you glue this in, push the bottom stair in the foam as hard as you can and pull the back stair up to meet the decking. It's not going to have a ton of depth to it, but enough to work. The captain needs a fancy window, right? To frame out a window, we'll just use some matchsticks. Hold it up to the window area, get the size, and cut 5 matchsticks to this length. Just put them all in their dry fit to see how you want the spacing. If you want more or less sticks, so forth so on. I don't want a big hot glue mess here, so I'm going to use super glue. Get a helper to hold it down for you. Pop out a stick and glue both the top and bottom and put the stick back in place. Super glue is also nice here because it's set in just a few seconds. So just repeat the process until they're all in. It was too hard to show the bottom window because of how big this thing is, but I did 3 on that one. Alrighty, every ship needs an iconic ship's wheel, so let's make one of those too. This is just a wood circle that I cut out with a hole saw, but you could use anything circular that fits. A big bottle mouth might work pretty well too, actually. Evenly mark it all the way around for as many handles as you want it to have. I did 8. Then take a pin vise and drill some holes in the side. No need to go all the way through, but it won't hurt anything if you do. Then take some of these fancy toothpicks, these are the super long kind, and carve out just below where the fancy bit ends. You want to turn the fancy bit into a big peg basically. Carve it all the way around and then just snap it off. Make sure your fancy pegs will actually fit into the hole first, and then with just a tiny drop of super glue, go ahead and put them in place. This glue is sort of a weird thick liquid or gel mixed with liquid. I don't know, it works pretty well though. Now take a small dowel and drill a toothpick size hole through it. You do want the hole to be a little undersized so that the toothpick is a tight fit. Hold your new Warhammer spike thingy to the wheel and mark where to cut off the toothpick. You can orient this however you want. I only wanted 4 in the middle, so I offset it. If you want it to look like the handles go all the way through, then go ahead and line it up with whichever 2 fit best. Glue that in place and cut as many more little bits as you need to fill in the circle, and then glue them in place. The liquid crazy glue works well here because it literally only takes a few seconds before it'll hold well enough that you can let go of it. Just set that up and let it all fully dry. Stairs. So I don't really know why, but these 2 gaps aren't the same width. Whatever, it'll be fine. Just hold up a wide popsicle stick and mark it for each side. Cut off about 5 steps for each side using the first one as a guide and set those aside. I'm going to keep setting things aside until I'm ready to paint it all in one go. For the stairs leading to the front, if I were to put them in front of the gap like the drawing shows, it would look cool and all, but it would also block access to the front hold area, so let's not do that. Instead, I'll do some half spirals. Again, using the wide sticks, stack up a bunch of them. I think I used 7 on each side. Clamp the stack together and drill out a 1/4 inch hole. These dowel packs that we used for the tip of the mast are roughly a 1/4 inch. Thread the dowel through the hole and figure out the height you're going to want. I don't know why it took me so long to figure this out, but it's 2 1/4 inch, same as the wall height plus a piece of foam. Anyway, once you have that sorted out, fan out the sticks on the dowel so they form a 90-degree spiral. I messed around with the placement quite a bit here and ended up settling on putting them on either side of the staircase that leads down. This does mean we need to put a roof over the stairs though, which is actually good because it'll help hide the steps that have no real depth. For the railing, I figured that the wall height of most of the ship is actually plenty, so I decided to skip putting rails anywhere but the top. Take some more of those 1/4 inch dowels and mark them at 3/4 of an inch. We could use 3/4 inch pegs as it is, but that's super boring. So put your dowel in a drill and grind the sections into little hourglass shapes. I suppose you could do this with a file in a lot of time, but most everyone owns at least a cheap cordless. If not, you can get a corded drill for like $10. Once you're happy with them, go ahead and cut them all out and sand one end of them nice and flat. The other end doesn't have to be perfect because we can just mash it into the foam. Don't forget to make that roof panel. Real simple, piece of ready board, trim it to fit, and texture it. When you texture it, leave the backside smooth to help you identify the back when you go to glue it on. In theory, it should be square, but knowing me, it's not going to be. For the captain's doors, we'll just make a couple simple wooden doors. It's 3 popsicle sticks wide with 2 more on top and bottom to keep it all together. Just a little bit of matchstick on there for a handle. Once all your little bits are cut out, made, whatever, grab some burnt umber and paint all the wood parts. All of the white parts of the foam, the roof lid thingy, the doors, all that. You'll also want to pre-paint a bunch of coffee stir sticks and matchsticks. These will be used for the gun port framing. Dry brush all of it with tan and then yellow, same as we did the rest of the ship. On the ship's wheel, I want it to look different, so paint the round bit in black and then do the center in black. And then paint all the spindle parts with the barn red we used on the barrels. You'll need to use a very small brush and be careful here. I'm not a good painter, so this is really hard for me, but it might be easier for you. Just make sure you get all around all sides of all the spindles. Then take some gold and do the tips of the handles, plus a little gold line in the middle of the spindles, or whatever design you like. Just make it cool looking. Take one of those gold skulls and cut the back of its head off. There's a mold line on it that you can follow, and then just glue it in the middle. I offset this to both the spindles and the handles. Will anyone see all the work you did here? Probably not, but you know it's there. For the railing on the top deck, I had planned on using some popsicle sticks like this, and that would work, but again, boring. So instead, let's use giant spider legs. If you break these at the joint, the plastic has some little holes in it that actually really help to make it look like real bones. Go ahead and glue all the uprights on there, 5 along each curve edge and 3 in the middle. And then stick your spider legs on. If you're having trouble breaking them, use some pliers. If you cut them with snippers, you'll get a weird pinch, so make sure you break them instead. You can put them on however you want. I just thought this looked pretty cool, keeping all the joints and ends roughly the same direction. And you can see it's pretty strong railing. Glue your lid on, making sure you don't glue the smooth back side to the removable part. And then glue the stairs on. Just some glue on the bottom step and along the edge of the top step. Again, not the part touching the removable part. For those stair slats, just put them in place in the gaps and use a little super glue. I tried using hot glue to start with, and that made a mess. Crazy glue doesn't seem to leave much mess or shiny spots, so you can go ahead and put it right on top of the step. It'll be fine. These and the spiral ones are spaced enough that you can put a mini on each step, maybe if someone's movement ran out on the stairs or something. Also, I ended up having to trim these doors down a little. Just hold them up and mark them, trim accordingly. Take a couple of gold skulls and trim the backs of the heads off. Here's that mold line that I was talking about before. And then glue them to the door about 2/3 of the way up. Still not enough gold for me, so I used a gold paint marker to retouch the skulls a little and put some gold on the handle. If you're the artsy type, you could get really fancy with these doors with that gold marker. I'll pass though. The edge where I trimmed it off probably won't be seen, but just in case, we're going to do a quick touch up with a brown paint marker to hide that raw edge. Just stick the doors in the hole, make sure to line them up nice from both sides so that they're not leaning, unless you want them hanging off of a hinge or something. Then add a little glue to the top and the bottom. I didn't really care if these could open, just do what's going to work best for you. On the cabin, we need windows. I have this. No, not the grass, set that aside. The plastic. Any blister pack will do, but this is nearly the exact right size to start with, so I'm going to use that. Same way I measure everything else, just hold it up to the thing it's supposed to match, mark it, and trim it. To glue these in, a dot of super glue does the trick, but be careful because wherever you put it, it's going to frost the plastic. To hide those edges, just frame the window with some of those coffee stir sticks. They're not long enough on their own to span all the way across, so I offset the extra little bits, one on one side and one on the other. While you're framing stuff, frame those gun ports. You can frame the inside if you want, but I don't think you really need to. I only did the outside. Figure out how far you want them to be open and cut a couple matchsticks to prop it up with. Normally these would have been opened from the top deck and tied off with rope, but there's not really any room for that on this, and I still want the decks to be able to come apart. So gluing or tying rope to the top deck is not going to work. I did this first one the hard way for sure. It's much easier just to glue the foam bit on and then glue the sticks under it. So there you go. Mine are more or less flat, but I still think it looks pretty cool without getting in the way once the top half is removed. Just glue up all of them and hope that the fur beast from the deep, this one right here, doesn't attack it. While you have the matchsticks out, cut a whole bunch of them 3/4 of an inch long. These will be the rungs for climbing up the side of the ship. Just a little bit of glue on each one there and stick it on. You can do as many as you like. I did one per plank and only one row each side. Figure out where you want the wheel to sit and cut your dowel down to fit that. Take a little piece of that double thick stuff and round the corners off of one end, and then shove the dowel wheel in at the right height for the wheel. Paint it up and glue the wheel in place. I guess you could let it spin free, but I'd rather not have my players messing with it. Little hot glue on the bottom and it sticks right on. It's kind of comically large compared to the Mini, but it looks right, which is what's more important. Plus, if you use the big bag of skeletons, those guys are closer to 54mm and it would fit them perfectly. So we need some furniture in here. These shelves I pretty much copied straight from DMG, but I'll work on my own version for a later video. And the bed we did in the cabin videos. Just put a little super glue on the bottom and the back and stick the shelf and bed in place. The table we did in the cabin, this is just a bigger version. This will be the captain's desk. That's cool, but this room still needs something, so let's add some clutter. Glue down some scrolls, some papers, a ketchup bottle, some other assorted bottles and books, just clutter it up. Stick a bottle and a couple little barrels in the corner for fun. I wanted those ship taillight thingies, but the only thing I had were these lampposts, and I couldn't figure out how to make them work, so I nixed that idea for now. Plus, small pieces hanging out like that can be fragile. Now, lay out all the stuff that goes in the bottom and glue it in. I threw a couple treasure piles in there, because what's a pirate ship without some treasure piles? Then do the top deck's cannons, cannonballs, and powder kegs. I have a few cannons here without wheels because I ran out of beads, but they still look pretty good without them. Just put them on the top decks as the lowest part has very little room between the nettings and rungs. Okay, gonna try something here. Picture in picture. This way I can zoom in on those tiny bits, but you can still see what's going on if I block the view or go out of frame. Let me know if you guys like that or if I should quit trying to be all fancy. Also, yeah, they're out of sync for some reason. I'll work on that. So, just a little dab of glue and stick it down. On those cannons, you can put the glue on each wheel and set it in place. This stuff actually holds really well. Just let all of that dry while you pop these skulls off. Well, not all of them, but a bunch. You will end up using all of the gold ones, though. For the top window, we'll use these skulls that don't have jaws on them, and then the ones with jaws for the lower window. You could cut the backs of the heads off of these, and they'd lay flat better, but you don't really need to, so just don't worry about it. Put a little dot of super glue on there and stick it directly to the window over the wood parts. I ended up doing 4 per on this window and 5 on the lower window. The tops of them might need a little touch up from where the plastic was on the sprue, so just go over that with a gold marker. Again, easy on that glue. It'll frost the glass, but I mean, this is so tiny, it'll be fine. To hide those seams and give the ship a little more something, take a bunch of white skulls that have the jaw and stack them along the seam. If you get a couple a little crooked, it'll be fine. They don't have to be perfectly lined up. You're mostly just trying to hide the seam. There are a couple of large human skulls in that pack too. I decided to use them to cap the ends of the railing. I also totally spaced that I needed stairs here too. So a couple more of those spirals, but you saw how to do that earlier, so you know how to make them now. No need to show that again. Take a bunch of the skulls and put them around the mast, however looks good to you. I went with one on each point of the mount, and then a couple small piles around the middle mount. I used gold ones for the one by the wheel. So what's a pirate ship without a Jolly Roger? This particular one happens to be Jack Rackham's flag. It's super popular because it looks awesome. It's also not protected by copyrights. Just print out a couple of them and cut them out. The final size of these ended up being about 2 3/4 by 3/4. We also want a red banner. That means no quarter given. This is a sheet of red construction paper. I'm just taking this half-inch strip from the short side. Cover the whole thing in the glue stick paste and fold it in half. Open it back up where the mast needs to go through and then cut it into a long point. Slip it over the tip of the rear mast, mash it closed, and then bend a little wave into it by wrapping it through your fingers. Get the angle you want sorted out. I went with about 45 degrees or so. And let it dry like that. Repeat the process with the Jolly Roger on the other two masts, but of course don't cut a point into them. You could, if you wanted, use some scissors to hack up the edge to get a frayed look, or you could burn little holes into it. But I kind of like them looking nice, so I'm going to leave them like that, even though it doesn't really match the rest of the ship. The more I looked at it, the more these spider legs seemed odd to me, so I went through and dry brushed them with a little of the antique white to make them match the rest of the bones on the ship. And this grand staircase wasn't really selling it for me, so I decided to deck it out with some skulls on the corner of each step. These things look great when they're just sitting flat. And I also used a couple more gold ones on the top of the dowel there just to mix it up a little bit. Alright, so now we have the ship as a whole, minus the sails because they don't fit under here. There's a ton of room for minis on here, and nearly all of it is scaled right. You eagle-eyed people might have noticed that we never did blackwash anything but the decks, and that was on purpose. I wanted the wash to make the skulls, the windows, the ports, all of that tie together. So lean it back and put your wash on. Do a lot of wash on those seams and spread it from there. Just make sure you drench those skulls so that they're all nice and the details pop out. You can see the space between the teeth. And let it run down and drip around those gun ports. Blackwash the railing up top too. But you don't really need to worry about the skulls on the deck. Maybe they're new or something. For the back window, put the wash on everything, even the window, and then just blot it off the glass with a paper towel. No need to clean them completely, just a bit so that there's no large dribbled dots or anything. And there you go, guys, a giant pirate ship. Sorry about the delay on this one, but now I know it'll mostly survive a fur beast encounter, plus a quick trip to the floor. That was one very long build. I'll try not to do that again. But overall, I am happy with the results. The patrons have voted, and the next build will be a much simpler to build ruined keep. If you'd like to vote for future builds and support the channel, head over to Patreon, or support with some coffee. Thank you for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, share, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you on the next one.